Okay, I'm going to start our meeting. We are waiting for Peter to join us, but I think in the interest of time, just a warm welcome to everyone to our first CEO Pulse of 2024. Just to remind everyone that this meeting is held with no intent to collude or engage in any matter that might contravene competition law. Conflicts of interest must be declared, and if required, members recuse themselves either before or during the meeting, as and when they become apparent. Our first speaker today is Martin Kingston, and Martin's going to share with us some progress on the collaborative activities between government and business. As you probably all know, SAMED has been a member of Business Unity South Africa for a number of years now, and it is an essential platform from which we gain access to information, opportunities, and insights, but also a platform for us to amplify our voice through the larger private sector business collective. Martin is chair, for the steering committee of Business for SA. He has 4 decades of global experience in investment banking and capital markets, with a particular focus on corporate finance in the private and public sector. He also has extensive experience in cross-border mergers and acquisitions, BBBEE, public sector restructuring and capital investments. He's been involved in over 30 transactions totaling in excess of 150 billion rand, acting for corporates seeking empowerment partners in securing investments, and the structuring and raising of capital for such transactions. We're very honored to have you here today, Martin, and excited to hear about progress that has been made between government and business. So over to you.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Tanya, for that welcome, and good morning, everybody. I'm thrilled to be your first speaker of the year. Hopefully I'll get us going on a positive note. I'm going to put my camera on just for a second to show that I really do exist, but there I am. It's pretty awful, so I'll take myself off camera. I thought that it would be helpful to give a quick review of the progress we've made in this partnership. If I can ask Laura to share the slides, please. And I hope that Teams will work well for us today. I know that many of us had significant problems yesterday as a consequence of the disruption caused by the cable. Laura, I don't know whether you're able to flight the slides. Oh, there's a hand up. Laura can't flight the slides. I can only assume.
I am just giving you permission, and she'll be able to do it in just a second.
Thank you, Caroline. Thank you very much indeed. And it's nice to see so many people up early in the morning, and thanks again for accommodating me early in the morning. These slides, by the way, are sort of hot off the press. We met with the president less than 2 weeks ago, and we meet with him every 6 to 8 weeks to review the progress that we're doing. Thank you so much, Laura. Laura is running our project management unit for Business for South Africa. She's also doing the same for the work that we've been doing on NHI. So she's very much in demand by us, and we're very appreciative of her. If we can go to the next slide, please, Laura, thank you so much. And what I suggest is I will go through the slides, and then we've allocated 10 minutes, I think, at the end, if you've got any input, questions, or observations. We'll overview the partnership. We'll look at the 3 areas that we're focusing on of energy, transport and logistics, and crime and corruption, the key strategic issues that have emerged over the past 9 months or so, and then, as I said, some closing comments. If we can go to the next slide, please, Laura, thank you. So as I said, we meet every 6 to 8 weeks with the president on a 2-weekly basis. There's a joint strategic oversight committee that meets. It's chaired by the Director General in the presidency, Pindi Beleni. I deputize for her and lead the business engagement. And that's really to address any bottlenecks in the system, overviewing the 3 platforms. They're all government platforms in which we participate. The National Energy Crisis Committee, its commitment is to end load shedding as quickly as possible. The National Logistics Crisis Committee, to turn around the performance in the rail and the ports. And then finally, the Joint Initiative on Crime and Corruption, which we see as capacitating primarily the NPA and reducing criminal activity. By the way, I should say across society, not just in the public sector. We think if we can address these issues, we can boost GDP by 3 to 5%, and we can create sustainable jobs of about 2.5 million. We can't do either of those without addressing these bottlenecks. We know they're not the only ones, but they're fundamental constraints, sapping in both investor and broader societal confidence at the moment. And what was absolutely key was making sure we had the systems, the processes, the governance in place and resource them appropriately so that we could then get into a cadence, which is exactly where we are now. Next slide, please, Laura. We've had very significant momentum that's been established. Many of you will have known that over 130 CEOs across the breadth of the country, representing some 11 trillion rands worth of market cap, have pledged their support for working on this collaboration and supporting the country. We've had over 170 million rands worth of funding. This is cash funding so far, provided by business to support government in this initiative. That's actually in the provision of technical expertise and resources. And as you can see on the right-hand side, across the three areas, a swathe of expertise that has been mobilized, over 350, and we're expecting more as we ramp up these efforts. Do we think that we should be supporting the government? Yes, we do. I think it's clear that there are huge capacity constraints. Is this a permanent solution? No, it's not. The government needs to be properly capacitated in its own right, but in the current circumstances with the challenges that we face, I think it's fair to say that we all feel that this is the only way that we're going to be able to really move the needle in a meaningful way. Next slide, please. And by the way, we will circulate these slides so that you have them for yourself. So in the last 9 months, real progress has been made. It took time to get traction, and we're not as good in articulating the narrative and communicating it broadly as we need to be. But in energy, we've unlocked capacity onto the grid, some 3.5 gigawatts of capacity, RFPs for new capacity coming on stream, particularly obviously renewable energy, and a very significant reduction. I know that many of us don't feel it, but nevertheless in load shedding, if we compare year on year, the establishment of the National Transmission Company and the new ESCOM CEO appointed who started work just a week ago. In the case of transport and logistics, similarly, we've been able to ensure that there are guarantees in place between Treasury and Transnet, that we've got investment being mobilized on key corridors, the sort of bulk freight and commodity corridors. We have published the freight logistics roadmap. And when I say we, that's obviously the government, but we have been intimately involved in all of those processes. And then, of course, the new Transnet CEO, CFO, and the Transnet Freight Rail CEO have been now appointed. And we need to have all of that in place, along with mobilizing the requisite commitment from business and expertise if we're going to really address these constraints. And then last, and I have to say it is least, it's probably the most important and the most pervasive, crime and corruption has taken much longer to put it in place. We're very mindful of the need to be at arm's length to preserve the independence of the criminal justice cluster, but nevertheless to give support. So it's taken time to put the joint initiative on crime and corruption in place. But again, we've made progress now in agreeing the terms of reference, the structure, the cadence, and starting again to resource it with a primary focus on establishing an integrated platform within business, Business Against Crime, South Africa 2.0, to really pilot the efforts for and on behalf of business. Next slide, please, Laura. There's one slide on each of the areas that we're focusing on. I'm not going to go through it in granular detail. It'll be there for you in due course. But I want to comment before I talk about the slide as to why these three as opposed to more. When we approached the president initially, which was actually in 2022 in the aftermath of the pandemic, you'll remember we went into the pandemic actually in a recession and being downgraded to junk status, and we've only now returned to our pre-COVID GDP levels. So it's a pretty appalling indictment of where we were and where we are. We recognize there were many areas that needed to be focused upon, of which three were the ones that we are focusing on. The others were, I have to say, municipal infrastructure in particular, water, and then dealing with red tape. But our view was that if we couldn't deal with three, we weren't going to deal with six. Let's get some traction on the three. And then, and if and to the extent that we've got the capacity, that we would scale accordingly and in due course. But we're very mindful of the need to actually not overpromise, but rather to overdeliver. In the case of energy, as I've said, the key is to improve the energy availability factor from Eskom, whilst bringing, as you can see on the right-hand side, new generation onto the grid, whether it's bid window 5 and the private sector playing a role there. Obviously, bid window 7 is now up and running. Bid window 6, you can see there as well. Other power sources, and critically importantly, the ERA bill being promulgated, and you'll have seen that the Energy Regulation Amendment Bill went through the National Assembly yesterday. It's now going to the National Council of Provinces. We very much hope that it will be implemented and signed into law before the end of the 6th administration. But we needed to ensure that we had a critical path, and this critical path, it took us many months to agree with government. When I say government, I mean the presidency, I mean Eskom, I mean the Ministry of Public Enterprises and of Mineral Resources and Energy, to get all of the stakeholders to align. That in and of itself was a significant achievement. And here you can see how the process ramps up when we remove the constraints in the system. And I don't want to oversimplify it, but I think that we're now making real headway, having identified the constraints, having agreed how they need to be addressed, and working collaboratively both with Eskom and the government more broadly. Next slide, please, Laura. In the case of transport and logistics, I think many of us thought energy was the problem. Actually, transport and logistics has proved to be a much more significant challenge to overcome, both in the context of rail and in the context of port. If you look at the rail volumes, those that were targeted, if you look at what was happening in March 2018, as opposed to the massive drop-off to March 23, that sets us in stark relief. We've now got current projections for 150 million tons per annum. We thought we should get to 170. That was a stretch target. We don't think we'll get there for the current year that is about to end, and then pushing forward to 193 million tons. So that shows just how badly we're performing relative to 5 or 6 years ago. So we need significant performance increase, both across rail and port, as well as within Transnet itself. We need to make sure that we can deal with derailments with reliability and availability in terms of locomotives. You'll all be familiar with that. Dealing with theft in particular, so security incidents, and availing Transnet of spare parts. And we are working literally hand in glove with the new management and indeed the board of Transnet to achieve that, once again with the support, in this case, of the Department of Transport, National Treasury, and of course, the Department of Public Enterprises. But it's going to take a long time, and I don't believe that we should underestimate the size of the challenge, A, that was inherited, and B, that we have to tackle. But I'm confident that we've now got the right resources in situ on both sides of the fence. By that I mean on the government side, at the level of the National Logistics Crisis Committee, as well as the Business for South Africa team. And then we go to the third area, which is that of crime and corruption. As I'd indicated, it took much longer to establish the structure, to capacitate it appropriately, to agree on joint priority areas. And I think given the sensitivity of the area concerned and the enormous damage that has been done to the criminal justice system broadly, from the NPA through to the police, we can understand just how much repair work has to take place. So putting in place the systems and the processes was key. Here, the NPA amendment bill, as you can see on the right, which actually creates the independence and investigating capacity of the NPA, or rather bolsters it and reinforces it, and allows the establishment of a digital forensic laboratory, was absolutely essential. And we've identified that if we can reduce theft of critical infrastructure items on the one hand, see us being removed from the grey listing process under the Financial Action Task Force by 2025, which is a commitment that's been made by government, and piloting the 10111 program will have made sort of real progress. There are some 7 overarching priority areas you can see on the left-hand area of the side, mainly capacitating, I have to say, the state, but in a manner that withstands scrutiny, as well as focusing on the 2 areas I've talked about, forensics on the one hand and the 10111 in the short term. then hopefully again we can scale in the longer term. Next slide, please, Laura. But I have to say there are challenges that we need to be very honest about, and these slides that we're sharing with you are slides, and this is the narrative that was shared with the president. When I say shared, it's actually jointly presented by government and business to the president and his cabinet colleagues. All of this costs both time, but more importantly, money. I say time because managing people's expectations as to how long it will take and how critical it is to make sure that it withstands scrutiny is much more time consuming than we would all like. And secondly, it costs significant resources, despite the money that's already been raised, some 200 million rand, including what we've mobilized for the Resource Mobilization Fund, which is to directly capacitate the presidency and government. We think we've got another 200 million rand still to raise for some additional work in energy, and then for the crime and corruption stream. And we're going to have to think tactically about how we do that. We know that many companies are suffering from enormous fatigue, but we need to be sort of redouble our efforts in making sure we've got the right resources that are available. Some people, myself included, do all of this work pro bono, but the majority of the resources need now to be appropriately compensated for their time and their skills. The second, which is in the middle, obviously I've talked about already, is the resource requirements, both at the level of government itself, within the presidency, within key departments, as well as within the SOEs that we are working with, and in that particular case, specifically ESCOM and Transnet. And although that funding is forthcoming, there's an increasing reluctance to do it without there being conditionality imposed. As soon as we impose conditionality, we get into a very complex set of negotiations with government at the worst possible time, given the fact that we've got forthcoming elections and we need to make real progress. So that's a balancing act that we're having to deal with all the time. And the last area, and I would have to say this is probably the one that we have as a country fallen down on most badly, is appropriately communicating the progress we've made, articulating some of the very real headwinds and challenges that we face, whilst being able to infuse a sense of hope and optimism that actually we're able to achieve our objectives over time. The second is ensuring that we do so in a manner where we've got some consistent communication within business, within government, and obviously between the two of us. You know, very easy to say, very difficult to achieve. We're all very much aware of the fact that there is disharmony between many government departments and ministers. We call it out very explicitly in front of them and the president, and it's agreed. And all of these work streams that we're talking about are led by, in our case, chief executives of large companies, or in the case of government, by director generals with ministerial responsibility clearly identified, so that we can hold people to account to be able to ensure that we bring the requisite progress to the attention of the public at large. And we feel that we are accountable indeed to the public at large. We're not just accountable to the business community or to narrow interests, but actually to the nation. And we all have a vested interest in this partnership, not just maintaining its momentum, but demonstrating success over time. Next slide, please, Laura. We also have said, and I think I'm right in saying, Laura, that this is the last slide, that although we've made progress, and if I'd have shown you the equivalent slides 9 months ago, it was much more an expression of hope than a demonstration of real and tangible progress. As I said, it takes time, and when you're, stuck in the weeds, you don't really get the perspective when one stands back and says, what have we achieved over the past 9 or more months? But we also have to be very clear about the targets that we set ourselves for the next 6 weeks, for the next 3 months, and indeed to the end of the year and beyond. We've been very clear, and in each of the meetings with the president, we do exactly what I've said. We look back at the progress we've made since the partnership began, but most specifically over the last 6 to 8 weeks. We look forward and we anticipate what progress needs to be made over the next 6 to 8 weeks, and we track it very explicitly, and we hold the parties to account accordingly. There was a suggestion that given the forthcoming elections, maybe we should just solve until the middle of the year. We actually disregarded that completely. We're not working with the ANC, we're working with the administration of the day, whoever that will be, and we're working in the national interest. We've made that absolutely clear to everybody concerned, and we understand why we're doing that. We think that we need to actually plan through to the end of 2024, potentially into the beginning of 2025. We think that's long enough for now. And so we've set ourselves some very significant targets in all of these three areas. The first is obviously to make sure that we can reliably and demonstrably reduce the level of load shedding, we think, to stage 1 and then below stage 1 into 2025. That is obviously in significant part achieved by bringing new megawatts. In this case, we've targeted 6 gigawatts of new generation onto the system. Passing the ERA bill, as I mentioned, it's gone through the National Assembly. It has to go through the NCOP. It then has to be signed into law, but it's a huge enabling legislation for the sector. And making sure that we can deploy private sector resources to power stations, that's an ongoing discussion. MCA stands for Mutual Collaboration Agreement between Eskom and business. We've already got one in place between Richards Bay Coal Terminal and Transnet in the transportation sector, where we identify with them key resources, we make those resources available, and then over time we are paid back. There's no profit in it, it's simply a mechanism to accelerate the provision of expertise. The case of transport and logistics, obviously that we can see the Transnet recovery plan making real and tangible progress. That was only going to be possible when we had permanent management in place. So we welcome that. Seeing rail volumes increase on a sustainable basis, as I'd indicated previously. The freight logistics roadmap, which has now been adopted, we need to monitor progress against the milestones. And again, coming up with a critical path agreed as and between government, the public sector, in this case Transnet, and business as to what we can achieve and what are the key enablers and obstacles to that. And then private sector participation through key projects. And it's worthwhile, again, observing that in all of these areas, what we're seeing is sort of an acknowledgement and a willingness to see the private sector in an appropriately regulated manner play a much more significant role in fixed infrastructure and in key areas of the economy than was the case previously. And then finally, in the case of crime and corruption, as I indicated, making progress on the Financial Action Task Force and the grey listing, with the hope and the expectation we can be removed in the course of 2025. That the NPA doesn't just make further arrests and prosecutions, but successful convictions flow therefrom. As I mentioned again, the NPA amendment bill being promulgated needs to be signed into law by the president. We know that there are a number of pieces of key legislation in front of him, some which we support, others which we feel very differently about, for example, the NHI bill, but certainly the two that are identified here, the ERA bill and the NPA bill, we feel need to be at the top of his agenda. And then a sustained reduction in infrastructure theft. And obviously there's a crossover between the crime and corruption work stream, as well as transport and logistics and energy, which are most significantly impacted by it. I think that's the last slide, if I'm right, Laura. We can go to either the next slide, but I don't think there is one, or take it down. But what I would like to say is that all of this requires resources, it requires real commitment, and I have to acknowledge the commitment of the many companies and individuals from business in that context, both small and large, formal and informal. You know, our approach has been very simply the following, which is if there is expertise that can be brought to the table, if it's appropriate and it's not duplicative, but it's additive, then we will avail ourselves of it. We want to make sure that we don't reinvent the wheel if it's being done better somewhere else already, that we want to make sure we give appropriate visibility to that work and we harness and leverage it rather than repeat it. We have no interest in reinventing the wheel. But finally, as I said, ensuring that we can appropriately communicate the progress that we've made, the objectives of indeed the partnership, so that we can demonstrate both within the country and indeed to the business community, but further afield, that there is real scope to harness the skills and expertise in the form of a collaborative partnership, which will be of greatest benefit to the country at large. That was the last slide, and to the extent, as I said, that there are either comments and input or questions, I would be very happy to take them, ably assisted by Laura, who I know is also on the call with me.
Martin, thank you very much for the presentation. This is Peter. I'm the current chair for SAMED. I was not able to join earlier, some glitches, not related to yesterday, but I think it's just the way this was set up. I have one question for you, which I wasn't able to ask you when you updated us at the AmCham board 2 weeks ago. We've been, I think, as a sector, trying to get our sector kind of get a ring fence for load shedding up to level 6 or stage 6 rather. And, similar to what we've seen with, the automobile sector. But I mean, we've not been able to do that. I highlighted that, I think, last year when we had a roundtable with the deputy president, and also when we had the meeting with the president. Do you think this is something feasible for our sector, especially hospitals that are still load shedded with, running complicated, life-threatening procedures in them? Do you think this is feasible, or maybe we're going about this the wrong way as a sector? Up to you.
Yes, I think, Peter, and good morning to you. I think it is an absolutely crucial question. For many of us, but most particularly and specifically, I would argue for your sector, the inability to predict and rely upon power, or indeed when load shedding is going to take place, makes any sort of planning completely impossible. Obviously, that's across the private sector, but very particularly impacts upon you. We've raised that. There is work that's taking place, as I think you know, to ensure that to the extent it is practically possible, we carve out medical facilities that are critical, but that has been thus far not successful. I do think that two things are going to help in this respect. The first, as I said, is that we are bringing very significant additional power onto the grid. Now, by the way, that creates an equal and opposite problem, because the grid itself needs to be very deliberately strengthened, and that's a huge undertaking. Some 200 billion rands worth of financing is required, but separating the transmission company was the first step in that process. I just need to say, all of this takes time, and I'd said earlier on, I don't know, Peter, whether you're on, that managing expectations and being honest about some of the challenges has been one of the big problems we've had. If I can just say in parentheses, we're in a sort of a pre-election process now, where politicians are unfortunately inclined to unfortunately gild the lily and make promises they can't deliver on. We've been very clear we're not going to do that, and indeed we've articulated that with the president and his colleagues. My sense is that the situation is absolutely and discernibly improving. If you compare the level of load shedding now to this time last year, either on a daily, weekly, or monthly basis, we've seen a dramatic drop off, and there's only two ways that we can effectively achieve that. One is by, as I said, increasing the energy availability factor within Eskom. The only way that can be achieved is by making sure the requisite skills and capabilities either are liberated within Eskom or infused into Eskom. And we've now got a program that is up and running with 5 or 6 power stations that have been agreed between us and Eskom, where we will mobilize the requisite skills within business to achieve that. But I think that we're not naive about the complexity. The second is, as I said, to complement and supplement that, to bring new energy on stream. And there we've seen a lot of progress over the last 2 years, not quick enough, not broad enough. But I'm confident that in terms of the overall trajectory, Peter, we are going to see a marked difference in the course of 2025. So sort of statistically, for example, year on year, we're 80% down in terms of stage 4 and above load shedding. I know that when we're suffering load shedding, we don't care whether it's stage 4 or not, other than the frequency. But I think we need to realize that the actual degree has been very significantly reduced.
Thank you so much, Martin. Appreciate it. Are there any questions, any comments from the SAMED board, the leaders? I see Tanya's hand up. Tanya?
Thanks, Martin. Another very large challenge facing particularly the medtech sector at the moment is outstanding government debt to our members. Now, we have sort of tried to tackle this on our own, and we've attempted to obtain meetings with the provincial CFOs, National Departments of Health. We've had some limited success with some provinces, but certainly it's early days and we're not seeing sufficient focus and attention paid to this issue. We're gathering statistics quarterly, and sharing that with the CFOs and National Departments of Health. But do you have any thoughts or suggestions, perhaps, is this something we could bring to BUSA? We're sitting on, at the moment, about 1.7 billion rand that's owed to only 30 of our members. It's certainly not all of our members because it's a voluntary process to provide statistics. But, particularly for small to medium companies, even larger companies, they really are starting to feel the crunch here. Any thoughts?
Yes, so thank you, Tanya. So you're absolutely right, both as to the articulation of the problem and the sort of size and scale of the challenge. I say that because obviously all of you, and indeed many of us, and I was heavily involved, as you will know, in the remedies or the response, if I can put it that way, that BUSA tried to achieve in the context of the pandemic and then the vaccination rollout program. And one of the challenges that we found was exactly that, which was both accessing provincial and other departments of health, but also extracting payment from them, and it cripples the system. What we found was, and I think this was not just in the case of the NGOH, but in other departments, was that COVID and the pandemic magnified all of the fissures, all of the structural failings across the country. And the only way that we were able to deal with it was by concentrating our firepower in parallel with engaging at a provincial level, at a national level, and dealing with it at the level of the minister and indeed the Director General. And some of you may recall that it was actually there that we established the Joint Strategic Oversight Committee concept. In that particular case, it was Dr. Buthelezi who was the chair, and I deputized for him, so that we could actually address the constraints in a sort of mechanical, methodical way, because there just wasn't the capacity, there wasn't the political will to do it in any other way. So I think that it's not a satisfactory answer, but BUSA can play an essential role, and you absolutely should bring it to their attention. Because I know that Cas Kuvadia and his newly appointed successor as CEO, Khulekani Mate, are very focused both on this area more generally, because non-payment of debt, if we talk for the sake of argument about power, is a massive problem. In that particular case, between local authorities and Eskom, and some of the work that we are supporting is expertise to develop a way of addressing absolutely extraordinary levels of debt, which needs to be either written off or substituted for, but where we can't actually rob Peter to pay Paul, if I can put it that way. In your case, I think the same applies. There needs to be a very clearly considered approach, both centrally but also at a provincial level. And with your permission, I will alert Cass and Kulakani to the fact that it's a conversation that as SAMED you absolutely should be having with them, Tanya.
Thank you, Martin. Really appreciate that. Are there any further questions for Martin?
I think, Tanya, maybe as a follow-up to this, before we go to Yaku's, you know, this is so severe, you know, non-payment of our members that as board, we've been thinking of going big bang to the treasury. This was already a big problem before COVID, by the way. So I don't think COVID made it worse or better, but it's such a chronic issue that, you know, during this time where trading is so tough, our members are starting to tank. But I don't know, what do you think about going soft or big bang approach, and then we'll go to Yaku.
I think, Peter, that there is no soft anymore. I think that doesn't mean it can't be constructive, but if we don't bring these issues to the attention of key decision makers, in your case, both National Treasury as well as obviously NDOH, I don't believe that it doesn't get the attention that it both deserves and requires. Obviously, we're in a period now where getting anybody's attention at a political level is extremely difficult. We're gritting our teeth because we know that this too, you know, will pass. We'll be through the elections. We'll find out whoever is going to be appointed thereafter. My working assumption is that without predicting any outcome, we'll be dealing with the same people to a greater or lesser extent, and therefore that's the approach that we've adopted. I would suggest that to the extent that you have access to the key decision makers in either National Treasury and or NGOH, I'm sure you do both. But once again, BUSA will avail itself and its relationships, I have no doubt, to achieve that is the right thing to do. And you need to go in with a very clear, very pointed, constructive perhaps, because as we know, the government doesn't respond well to sort of hostility and aggression, even if it makes us feel better at the time. We need, at the end of the day, we need to deal with them as constructively as possible. That would be my recommendation. I think you do need to go in hard, because unfortunately these issues don't solve themselves.
Thanks, Martin. Yaku?
Peter, I see Jeremy's hand.
Oh, Jeremy. Okay, yeah, sure. I thought it was Yaku, sorry.
Thanks all. Martin, I was just wondering, I'm Jeremy Wallace from the CSIR. I was just wondering on the infrastructure theft angle, whether we could actually connect in and find a little bit more information offline on exactly what you're up to there.
Yes, so I'm more than happy to do that. As I said, Laura, who's running our project management office, is on the line, and she will connect you with the relevant people in the crime and corruption work stream. I think that's the most efficient way of doing that, and they will make themselves available to you. Thank you.
Okay, cool. Thanks very much.
Any more questions, comments? Parting comments, Martin?
Well, my parting comment is to thank all of you for listening to me for half an hour. We'll circulate the slides. The more that we can disseminate the work that we're doing, the more that we can encourage you and your members to participate in that work and act as ambassadors for it, the quicker we will make real and tangible progress, and the better we'll be able to communicate that progress to all stakeholders. And to the extent that there are obstacles, Peter, to call them out, as I said, in a constructive way. We are always looking for assistance in both the form of expertise as well as funding, as I said. I have to say that because, you know, all of this does take time, but more importantly, cost money, and we account for every single rand that is spent. But that isn't the purpose of this call. The purpose of this call is to avail your members of an understanding of the progress we've made, and to thank you as members of BUSA and of the broader business community, as Tanya was saying at the outset, for both allowing us to present but for allowing us a coordinated approach, which can only be in everybody's best interest. So thank you all very much indeed, and I wish you a successful balance of the day. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you very much, Martin. We'll stay close and connected, and maybe we'll plan another update later in the year and see how those key priorities are tracking. Appreciate you spending time with us.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Goodbye, everybody.
Okay. Tanya, over to you for the next part of the session.
Thanks, Peter. So for those of you who attended our CEO Pulse meeting, the last one of 2023, you'll recall that we invited Vic van Vieren to share some progress with the medical technology medical technology master plan. It was originally called the Health Products Master Plan, but now it's changed, and it has actually evolved since Vic started with this process. But just maybe as context, you will recall the DTIC wanted to implement and launch a master plan. I think it was 3 years back, and we participated in a number of working groups. Things went a little quiet, but they were certainly momentum was put into it last year when Vic van Vieren, who's an independent consultant, joined, and now we are almost on the cusp of launching this master plan. The SAMED board have reviewed the plan. We have met with Vic. We have shared some further insights and areas that we feel need to be strengthened. And we will be asked as an industry association to sign our commitment to this master plan, and that will impact our members. So we felt it was essential that we get Vic to share with you, what's in the plan and what's anticipated. We will also, after this event, share the actual draft of the plan for members to review and provide input on. And as mentioned in due course, SAMED will be asked to sign up on the plan. Just a little bit about Vic very quickly. Interestingly, Vic started his career at the South African Department of Justice. He moved into the private sector as a corporate legal advisor and HR director in various large corporates. He was actually, interestingly, a founding sort of establishing entity in terms of Business Unity South Africa, and he was appointed as the first COO at the time. He has also served on the South African Council for Higher Education, the National Economic Development and Labour Council, the International Labour Organization, and the Council of the Pan-African Employers Confederation and the South African Power Utility Research Advisory Board. He has worked at the United Nations. He was a director for Southern and Eastern Africa, covering 23 countries, and also was appointed director of the global portfolio at the ILO in Geneva. Vic, there's a lot more I can say about you, but I know we're running a little behind time, and we really want to hear from you about the MedTech Technology Master Plan. So over to you.
Hi, Tanya. Thank you. I'm going to share my screen. Let me just see if need to click buttons here. Can you see my screen?
We can.
Okay, thank you. Right, everyone, I just want to give a brief process background and tell you where we are and what's happening. As you know, the master plans have been going for a number of years now, some of them. And there are 28, there should be 28 master plans. The country was divided up into 28 economic sectors, of which medical devices is one, or medtech is one. And that never materialized. But what I do need to say that many of them, some of them are working, some are not working so well. And I've had a look at why some of them are not working well. And the main reason is they've taken on too much on board to start off with. And they're trying to cover all their angles, and it's just not working. And so they have to go back to the drawing board. And so we need to look at the medical devices master planning, trying to hit a few key areas and not try and cover all the bases. Otherwise, we're going to run into the same challenges. Secondly, the management of the master plans has been left a lot to be desired, and they're scattered. Some lie within ministries, some lie within the DTIC, some are with TIPS. There's sort of 5 with TIPS and a few with DTIC and another few in the ministries themselves. So we've met, and part of the work I do is with PPGI, the Public-Private Growth Initiative. And we've met with the Office of the President and had very good discussions. In fact, we're doing a presentation next week to try and coordinate to have all the master plans at a central point, not managed there, but coordinated there and within the President's office, because part of the problem we've got is unblocking challenges within many of the government departments. Your outstanding debt, for example, the DTIC that we are working with to get the master plan in place has no authority over the Department of Health. But if we hit it from a President's office point of view, we've at least got the power to start unblocking and get some of these challenges out of the way. So at the moment, we've got a draft. It's with the DTIC, but let me take you through some of the important components and then conclude with the way forward. We've got 4 pillars that we focused as key focus areas. I'm not going to read each slide right through, but these need to be actioned through to 2030. These pillars will support the realization of a vision, and the vision is digitalized, and that's an important component because at the moment the systems run by the regulatory side are archaic and need to be updated so we can have a much smoother transition when we're looking at the administrative side of things, certification, and when we come to registration. Integrated and cohesive ecosystem that enables, supports, and encourages development, growth, and competitiveness of local medical technology value chains to produce reliable, quality, and affordable medtech for domestic and export markets. Medtech obviously is medical devices and IVDs and artificial intelligence. We've given it a very broad scope. The important part is that we want to look at an increase of local manufacturing and obviously into export, because the current statistics show us that we've got 90% import of medical device or medtech and 10% local manufacturing. However, also clear in this is if we don't get the export markets or the Africa market in particular on sides, we don't have enough volume in South Africa to justify any serious investment. And that has been made clear by the multinationals, particularly from within SAMED. Strategic objectives, growth of proficient and competitive medical technology industry over 3 years, the reduction of the industry-specific trade deficit by 5% over the next 5 years, looking at 1,000 new jobs in the next 3 years, and to digitalize and use artificial intelligence to enable proficient and regulatory processes. Now, these are all nice words, but how are we going to achieve this? There's 4 pillars. The regulatory framework is a big one. And I've had extensive discussions, in particular with SAPRA. Just to give you one area that I think we've got a breakthrough is that they had this fee structure which is pending and like a sword of Damocles over the head of the private sector. We've persuaded them in their workshops and having meetings with them that they need to do a regulatory impact assessment to determine the impact of what they're trying to do. And this morning at 12 o'clock, I'll be having a meeting between SAPRA and the Localization Support Fund, who have indicated they would be prepared to fund an independent assessment on the fee structures, and hopefully we can persuade that anything new that comes to the market or comes forward from SAPRA will be subjected to a regulatory impact assessment. But there's a lot that needs to be done within the regulatory framework in terms of the capacity of SAPRA, having the right skill set. Many of you have given me examples of continual frustrations of working with the regulator. So that needs to be sorted out as a focus point. Market growth is obviously an area, and how we're going to look at market growth I'll touch on in a moment. Technology production and skills development is another angle. What has surprised me is that we don't have a huge skills shortage at the moment within the industry, and that most companies have said to me they've got adequate skills. Here and there they have a challenge, but if the demand increases, we're going to have to look at where we obtain the skills. The only area I have found a shortage is, in fact, in the regulatory environment. In SAPRA itself and within the private sector, there aren't adequate skills to deal with what should be the regulation. Research, innovation, and data is key, and there CSIR through Jeremy have been very helpful in putting together a proposed model. We go to the next slide. Okay, what are we looking at as the key drivers? Creation of an enabling regulatory environment, which I have spent time on. Preferential procurement agreements in both public and private sector. The biggest challenge I've had is the Department of Health. I've met with 2 players in the Department of Health, but I've had for 3 weeks now pushing for a meeting with the DG and possibly the Minister to get them on sides. Every workshop I go to, every discussion I go to, everybody's there except the Department of Health, and they are the key player in this exercise. So if we're going to talk about the expediting the outstanding debt, or we're going to look at preferential procurement agreements, then we need to have the Department of Health on sides. I've had discussions with the hospital groups, I've had discussions with medical aids, and they are all key to identify products that can be manufactured locally that are currently being imported as a starting point. The private sector have certainly got the capacity to pick up the production of increased medical devices in South Africa. So preferential procurement is an angle. African market access strategy. The minister, we've had 3 meetings with him, that's Minister Patel, has indicated that he's prepared to put effort into an African market access strategy by looking at country-to-country agreements, by looking at SADC, by looking at Zazibona, which is a group of African countries that are together, even looking beyond that. So the African market access strategy and the strategy of country-to-country agreements is something that we need to look at very seriously. What I did look at is the things like BRICS, the African Trade Agreement. I think we're wasting our time if we want to try and get into the BRICS in any real manner. It's just not going to happen. But we do need to look at protection of the South African products against the importation of products from China, for example, and India, where we are held to certain standards and they aren't. For us to go to China, we've got to do clinical trials in China, and we've got to pay a huge registration fee. They just come in and there's no requirement on them at all. Whether we've got the muscle to do that, we'll have to see. Identification of medtech to be manufactured locally, I've touched on that, and to establish a path of innovation and commercialization onto manufacturing. Now, the frustration that we have is the innovation is working, and at CSIR they developed a product and want to go to market after clinical trials and are looking for certification, only to be told by the regulator that they don't have the ability to assess that particular device, and that they need to go to the Europe or the USA markets to get certification. It's really counterproductive. The minister pushed me in the master plan to look at who's going to give what. These are some of the areas that you need to look at and advise me whether there is something that bothers you or whether you can add or want to subtract from it. Government to create an enabling regulatory environment. These are their commitments. Conduct regulatory and commercialization impact assessment. Review of introduce tariffs. Facilitate the payment of debt. That's the point that was raised in Martin's discussion. Identify areas that may need support through incentives and other forms of assistance. You'll see in the document, I haven't got specific reference to incentives other than a broad statement. And this is because the minister asked me to take out some of the suggestions that were made by you, some of you, like tax incentives and others. But what we are doing is I'm working with the IDC, with Nathan Fredericks, and they're going to put up a fund of about 500 million rand as a starter. It's a reasonably sized fund. It's not the best, but this is something we're going to put on the table, hopefully by the time we get to a point of signing. We need to they need to look at preferential procurement, invest and participate in skills development and awareness programs, exporters and stakeholder forum. These last 3 bullets are important. Create exporters and stakeholder forum, develop an African market access strategy, identify potential new trade agreements. Now, some of this the DTIC can do, and the minister has committed to that. Some of it is going to be reliant on other government departments, and that's the challenge. I've met with the Departments of Science and Technology, and they are pretty comfortable and on board and supportive. Also met with Proudly South Africa, and we've also met with the Treasury. The industry, identify medtech for local manufacturing, increase domestic innovation and manufacturing, identify areas that may need support through incentives and or other forms of assistance, invest to grow capacity and capability. Very broad statements. There's nothing specific here. Invest in technology, innovation, R&D and CapEx. Invest and participate in skills development and awareness programs. Support Proudly South Africa and SAPRA, develop an Africa market access strategy with government, and look at BBBEE initiatives. The BBBEE is a challenge because the industry and the nature of the industry driven by small business is very difficult to move that space, but we do need to look at it. It cannot be ignored as to how we can transform the industry, particularly with more ownership into the hands of Black people. At the moment, it's just not happening there. Private and public procurers, identify medtech for local manufacturer, preferential procurement, and support Proudly South Africa and SAPRA. The trade unions, I've got a meeting with COSATU. They seem pretty comfortable. I've got a meeting on Monday with them. Support Proudly South Africa and participate in training and awareness programs. That may increase there, but it's an industry that isn't highly unionized. And so it's one that I haven't got many points of what they need to deliver. Maybe you or the guys I meet within the unions on Monday will be able to up that game. I find in some industries that's pretty much what they've got in that box because of the fact that they're not highly unionized. You'll find it very different in the automotive and labor-intensive industries. The way forward now is that the minister has indicated at the end in December, when I last met with him, that he wants to meet with the captains of industry. The industry bodies, which will be included in that, would be SAMED, SALDA, and MDMSA, and obviously whoever they wish to have at that meeting. I think it will be a meeting where one can clearly ask the minister about his commitments, raising areas like the facilitation of the payment of debt and any other triggers that you believe are important to go forward. The big thing that's going to be needed is a program management unit. And that's where industry needs to decide whether they're prepared to put any funding on the table to fund a program management officer that's going to drive this. When I look at the other successful or unsuccessful plans, master plans, it's a lot because they don't have someone who can drive it. The funding, you get some very junior person who takes minutes, arranges meetings. You need more than that. You need someone who's got thick skin, who's going to negotiate. This means negotiation. It means getting the government departments to be coordinated. It's not going to happen overnight that you're going to find Ministry of Health and DTIC suddenly coming on board and being okay. Sorry, someone's got their yes. Mic on. I'm not sure if they're wanting to speak. But what we need to do is to have a very frank discussion with the minister to say, if there's going to be a signature appended, to what extent will government honour its commitments, and to what extent private sector will come on board as a partner in this exercise. Those master plans that are working, it does make a difference. I do believe that if we get this master plan in place and we just identify a few key areas that can change the game, that could be a catalyst to addressing the broader framework of what needs to happen in this sector, like getting Africa on board. Having worked in Africa over 23 countries for a number of years and the SADC arrangements, I was able to infiltrate the SADC processes and achieve quite a bit of success in labour market statistics, for example, where nothing was happening. And so it is doable, but you need to have someone there who's going to do that legwork for you, and not someone from within government. That's why the program management unit is going to be extremely important. Without that, we're going to waste our time. Right, that's my presentation. I haven't gone into the nitty-gritty of each pillar, and that you'll see in the document where it spells out the detail of the programs that we want to run. I've just given the broad scope. But the important point to remember is that we can't be all things to everyone in this master plan. We need to start with a real focused base on one or two areas that we can successfully implement. I would say regulation and market. And yes, the others, I don't want to ignore the others, but if we can get something right there, it'll be a catalyst to bigger things. I sound like a preacher. I'm going to stop there. Tanya, back to you.
Thanks so much, Vic. appreciate it, and also all the hard work that you've done, and that you've taken the time to actually sit and speak and meet with, you know, CEOs and companies across the board, multinationals as well as local manufacturers and distributors. So I think we're excited. The SAMED board are in support of this master plan. There will be ramifications for industry. We'll be called upon to support, to participate, and in some instances to consider how do we change what we're doing so that we can build, you know, the local manufacturing industry. So I'm very grateful for that. Are there any questions for Vic? I think obviously with these master plans, yes, Peter.
Tanya, Peter, yeah. Vic, thank you very much for the presentation. Appreciate it. The connection of this with what you know, Department of Trade and Industry is asking for, how do you see that? They ask obviously to spotlight some of the companies that are doing on the ground work, the black industrialists and all that. Do you see any connection here?
Sorry, you mean the connection with the trade and industry and the private sector?
Yeah, where they were looking for champions in, you know, for instance, local manufacturing, packaging, finishing, obviously driving the also the kind of a industrialist program or similar.
I think what we've got, if you look at the process, we've established an overarching implementation committee, and that's where the process becomes important, which will be populated by private sector and government players. But in each of the pillars, we've identified subsets of this overarching committee where we identify champions in the private sector and elsewhere and possibly in the government. What I found, for example, in the IDC, a champion through a guy, this Nathan Fredericks that I mentioned, someone who's extremely open to discussion rather than looking at the political level at implementation. So yes, we would have to identify champions, but that is where the program management officer becomes key to making sure that these champions are given the space and the time to coordinate and drive these initiatives.
Thanks, Vic.
Thanks, Vic. I don't see any hands, but I do urge the members, the CEOs, to really look at this document carefully, put in your comments. We will circulate it in the next few days. And certainly, I imagine, Vic, that everyone will be invited to the launch. And I guess, you know, the devil is in the detail. But excited about this initiative, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Great. Okay, so we are running a little bit behind time, but what I'd like to share with everybody is just some progress that we've made, or an update on activities around a few areas that we've been busy with. So I'm going to share my screen. Caroline, if you could just let me know if you can see that.
It's coming up. Just give it a moment and then I'll let you know. There we go. I can see it.
Great. Okay, so firstly, in terms of outstanding payments, you may, hopefully some of your companies are participating, and this is another call to ask that you please do participate if you haven't, and to contact Ntokozo at the SAMED office because he is managing the data input of this project. We have asked for 2 sets of statistics thus far. November last year and February this year, but this can just give you a good quick view on where we're at. This is certainly not all of our members, and only 30 companies submitted data in this last February run. But as you can see, for all of the provinces, a total of 1.171 billion rand outstanding over 30 days. So certainly this is cause for concern. We have also, if you look at the comparison with the November data, you'll see that that amount has increased somewhat. But just to let you know that what we've done with the data, we have shared the results with the National Department of Health as well as the provincial CFOs and requested meetings. So far, we've met with the Gauteng CFO and his team in January, and in fact, I have a progress update meeting planned at 9 o'clock with them today. We've scheduled a meeting with Western Cape CFO Simon Kay for the 20th of March to talk through their stats. And we are continuing to request meetings with the other provincial CFOs as well as the National Department of Health CFO. I have not had clear responses yet on meetings with them. So if need be, we will escalate to the DG of Health. We will be writing to the Minister of Finance. As Martin suggested, we must also avail BUSA in this regard. We are also engaging legal as to what other options might be available to SAMED. And if push comes to shove, we may even go public. So that means go to the press on this matter. So please, it's really important that you participate. We don't gather these stats month on month. We are doing it quarterly. So the next run, I think, is in April. But if you haven't registered on the Data with Integrity portal, which is what we're using to gather the stats, please ensure that your finance people are in touch with Mtukozo. I think if I can just go through all of the items quickly, and then we can open up to questions from the floor. Now, you may also be aware that our exemption from 18A and B is coming to an end this year. And so the SAMED board have decided that we should again request for an exemption from the pricing committee. Now, these are in relation to bonusing regulations in the Medicines Act under 18A, and then sampling of medicines, medical devices, or IVDs under 18B. Currently, we have an exemption from these two regulations in the Act, and we will be asking for a further exemption from the pricing committee. We have a meeting scheduled with them on the 26th of March. But just to summarize, although we support the intentions of the 18A and B draft regulations to prevent perverse activities and ensure affordable medical devices and IVDs, we, however, do support that there are certain activities that should be considered acceptable. And currently, the draft regulations under 18A and B prohibit certain acceptable acts. So these include volume discounts, settlement discounts, sampling and demonstration products, placement of equipment, devices in a retail setting, donations of devices, and even data and registry fees. So we will also write to SAHPRA because 18B is within the remit of SAHPRA, whereas 18A is with the National Department of Health Pricing Committee. But our arguments will be to extend the exemption. We feel that the pricing committee needs to review the submissions previously received on the draft regs. They need to review other impacted legislation, such as the medical device regulations, which we know the amended version is imminent for publication and will include regulations around sampling and demonstration of medical devices and IVDs. We do feel there must be greater engagement with broader industry and the impact should these other certain practices be prohibited. The minister should consider drafting acceptable acts for medical devices and IVDs, standards, protocols in order to meet these acceptable acts. Also consider the medical device code or other self-regulated codes that do include clauses around these particular practices. They need to consider compliance and enforcement mechanisms, the outcomes of the health market inquiry, and then publish amended regs for further comment. In terms of Project 18C, and I know it wasn't on the agenda for this meeting, but I just do want to give you some feedback. We've been working very closely with the Marketing Code Authority. In fact, SAMED has signed a terms of reference with them, and we have a Project 18C task team that meets on a regular basis. This is in relation to the minister drafting regulations in terms of the marketing of medicines, medical devices, or IBDs, and providing for codes of practice. Now, one of the concerns that members have raised and the challenges that we have experienced across the sector is that the SAMED members and even other pharmaceutical companies may be bound by certain codes, such as the marketing code or the medical device code, but those companies that are not members of trade associations are not bound by codes. And so the playing fields are not leveled. Apologies, I think someone might need to mute themselves, if you don't mind. And what we are trying to impress upon initially with SAPRA, but we had limited success. SAPRA wasn't sure that they were the body to deal with this particular matter. But more recently, we have engaged the Department of Health, particularly Fundile Gebreheden, who is the Director for Health Sector, Health-wide procurement under NHI. And they have agreed to take up this mantle. They have already started preparing a policy on 18C for the minister eventual approval, but this will then go to Parliament as well. And the eventual outcome will now depend on what is considered a CEIAS consultative process. It's really a policy development process that sits within the policy department at the presidency. But I do feel that we're starting to make progress. We've motivated for this policy development to occur. It has started. And in time, there will be overarching stakeholder engagement. So just to share quickly with you, there are some timelines already anticipated. There is the SAES voluntary participation process, which started in December 2023. And this slide actually comes from a slide set that was presented to SAMED and the MCA in November of last year. I'm not sure that we'll keep to these timelines, but as you can see, there certainly is a roadmap in place, and it does seem that National Department of Health is serious now about drafting regulations for 18C. These are some of the stakeholders that they've identified that will need to be engaged as part of that SAES process. Certainly it's not exhaustive, and we may add to that. So the trajectory of the policy development is current. Stakeholder consultation will be key in the near future. And I think we need a structured industry approach which will serve us better and ensure clarity and alignment and clear messaging. So the 18C task team are engaging and looking at how we can ensure broader industry awareness and involvement. Currently, MCA is representing Pharmisa, IPASA, and others. At the moment, not represented on the task team are SALDA and MDMSA and some GBMSA companies, but we are looking to a strategy of how we get those entities on board. So we suspect a rigorous policy formulation and adoption process. Not only key health sector stakeholders will be engaged, but you know, overarching, even civil society will need to be considered. It's a good time for us to stand together and align our thinking. We're not sure of the absolute particular outcomes. That does depend on the policy process. And lots is at stake for health products industry and companies going into the future. Any questions? I see a hand. Jeremy.
More than
Jeremy?
Is there more than one Jeremy? I didn't put my hand up, sorry.
Oh, beg your pardon. I thought I saw your hand.
Sorry.
Peter, I don't see any questions, but I'm wondering if I know this was on the agenda and I didn't include it in my slides. I think it would do well to maybe share with the members a little bit about our meeting with Discovery Exec last year, because that is a key area of challenge for members. Price increases and reimbursement discussions. And then I can share also some feedback regarding meeting with the Registrar of the Council for Medical Schemes that Donata and I attended this week.
Yeah, agreed, Tanya. Maybe, I don't know, before we get to a little bit of a discussion with, on Discovery, do you have any kind of announcement, broadcast that you want to make about the, upcoming meetings? Maybe Caroline?
Caroline, I'm happy to talk to one or two, but if you'd like to, I think you know our schedule better than anyone.
Sorry, Tanya, I didn't hear that.
Okay, Peter was just asking about upcoming meetings and if we want to make an announcement thereon.
Sure, no problem.
know
We do actually have an important one with the launch of the Women Empowerment Index. It's called the Catalysts of Change Forum. That's coming up on the 11th of April that I think is very, very important for members to attend. We do have a very robust events calendar for the year, and it is available on the events page, but to really kind of draw some attention to this event, it's going to be a phenomenal event. We've reached out to some really great speakers to come and participate in the discussions around this. We'll be launching 2 really exciting initiatives, so we're really looking forward to that. And I think that it'll be a great opportunity for members not only to come and hear about those really exciting initiatives, but also to network a bit amongst each other.
And if I can add to that, we have invited key people. So it's people who are in charge of procurement in the, some of the public-private hospital groups, but also some public sector key people. And we are going to launch that index with the members. And ultimately, the success of the index does depend on the members submitting their information and tracking their progress over time. I think it's actually a first for South Africa. There isn't another Women Empowerment Index of its type, of its kind. So we're extremely excited by that. Also, just to add, on Monday, we have an important employment equity update on the regulations that were published for comment. Those may also have a large impact for members when they're finalized. So please make sure that if you are voluntarily submitting employment equity plans, if you have more than 50 employees, that you participate in that session, because we do need key information from members to support our comments.
Yeah, thanks, Tanya and Caroline. I mean, we can't emphasize this more. The excitement, I think, that is coming from outside looking at this, because the Women Empowerment Index survey, it's one of a kind. And like, Tanya mentioned, the likes of Netcare Life, the big hospital groups want to be part of this section. So do make time to attend, to join. It's unique. I don't, nobody has done this before, and I think it also helped to kind of spotlight SAMED as a industry body and the medtech sector. Any other one before we go to Discovery?
Peter, if I can just add, one of the features or the benefits of participating in the Women Empowerment Index will be that a member can download a certificate which actually gives your Women Empowerment Index score, and you'll be able to track your progress over 5 key metrics. And you can use that certificate when you bid for tenders, both in the public and the private sector. So it really does support your bottom line. It's not just something nice to do.
Indeed. Okay, Caroline, if there's nothing else on the broadcast, yeah, some feedback on SAMED board engaged discovery around November last year, basically related to, the draconian way of refusing price increase for all our members and basically, pushing back on everything else the sector is doing. I think we as the board were very clear about, what they were doing, the fact that some of the actions are very impacting the industry in a negative way. We've seen some of players making a decision to withdraw or not to bring products to South Africa in the long run, and in fact, even in a short to medium term, we've seen the damage. And we walked away feeling that we're not heard. And unfortunately, at the time, it was the transition from Ryan Notch to the current Ron CEO, and we just felt that we're not heard and understood. We want to obviously have a follow-up meeting with them, and maybe kind of a last throw of the dice. Like Martin was saying, be forceful but collaborative, because at the end of the day, we need each other. But to the extent that, if that route is not working, we can explore other ways to be heard. So that was, Tanya, that's the high level view of or the take from that meeting. I know Neil was there as well. Neil, do you want to give color to this high level feedback?
Peter, good morning, everybody. Thank you. Yeah, I think just a couple of things to add, Peter. Obviously, there's been a change in guard as such at Discovery with Ryan Noach moving. So it's kind of a re-engagement with them, but obviously the existing people have been involved just in a lower position, such with Ron Whelan and Dr. Nolatandu. So as you've set out, Peter, with our engagement with other stakeholders and then setting a path to re-engage with Discovery, I think is key in the right path. We know that they are very much involved with various stakeholders in our sector, but I think that the collaboration and partnership between us and Discovery, as well as other funders, we should also branch it outside of Discovery. We do know that they administer around 60%, I think, of the funds now. So yeah, I think it's the right timing to re-engage with them and take the steps a little bit further. So I'm very much supportive of it, and we'll drive it with yourself, Tanya, and the rest of the board.
Thanks, Neil. Are there any comments, any questions before I hand over back to Tanya to give feedback from the Council of Medical Schemes? No, going once, twice. Tanya, do you want to move on and give an update?
Thanks, Peter. So as part of this engagement with Discovery, it was also decided that we should have a discussion with the Council for Medical Schemes and identify if there is any support or recommendations they could make to us. And Dr. Kabane has asked that we put something in writing to him so that he can, engage with some of his internal departments. But one of the things that he said we should really consider, and that's participating in the PMB review process, because that's another way to ensure that the appropriate medical devices are included in the formularies for the various PMB conditions. my overall sense of the meeting was that he was sympathetic to what we're experiencing. He mentioned that there has been some movement. If you may recall, the Health Market Inquiry report included a suggestion or a recommendation that a supply-side regulator be implemented. And he mentioned that the National Department of Health has been engaging the Competition Commission on how to implement that. And he felt that that might be a platform that would give medical device companies greater opportunity to sort of be heard and to ensure that the decisions that are made around reimbursing medtech are, based on evidence and not just on price. So we'll put together a report. I'm actually meeting with Donata and her team this afternoon, which we'll submit to Dr. Kabane, and hopefully we'll see if there's other avenues that we can consider. There's always the opportunity for members individually to use the Council for Medical Scheme processes and the complaint processes should they feel that a medical scheme has not abided by the Medical Schemes Act and the various regulations thereto. So there is also that opportunity available to members. That's all from me, Peter.
Thanks, Tanya. I think, if there are no questions, you mentioned that we're low on time. We should move on to the next agenda item, which is run by you and our guest today.
Perfect. So allow me to introduce our final speaker for today's CEO Pulse, and that is Professor Johannes Fagan. Prof first engaged the SAMED board in 2023, and we felt that this request was really of importance to the entire membership. And so we have invited Prof to speak today. Prof is the president of the Colleges of Medicine of South Africa. He's also professor and chair of the ENT department at the University of Cape Town. Now, the college has recently launched a new scientific journal to support research in South Africa. And Prof will present a brief background of the Colleges of Medicine, the objectives of the journal, and how members can support medical and dental research by supporting authors who really cannot afford to publish their research. So very warm welcome to you, Prof, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Well, Tanya, thank you very much. Can you hear me?
I can, loud and clear.
Okay. Well, firstly, thank you very much for the opportunity. I'd like to thank you and also Peter McClarpy for actually giving us this opportunity. So I'm going to speak about the Journal of the College of Medicine of South Africa, but also take it a little bit broader than that as well. And I'm going to be talking about how we can possibly form a partnership with you and all your member companies to support this waiver fund. So just to give you some background, the Colleges of Medicine of South Africa, it really is the apex organization for medical and dental specialists in the country. It's a membership organization founded by a group of medical specialists in 1955. And prior to that, all trainee specialists had to go to the UK to take the exams. 29 colleges under one umbrella so represent every medical and dental specialty in the country. We have a big membership of over 11,000 medical and dental specialists on our books, and it is in effect the custodian of specialist training standards in the country. So very much like your organization does similar things in terms of device and medical devices. And we're probably best known for running the National Unity examinations. We offer 102 qualifications by biannual certification examinations. And these examinations are actually conducted by the academics around the country under our auspices. and we confer about 2,400 diplomas, fellowships, and certificates per annum onto doctors. We have 20 diplomas. They are for non-specialists or medical officers, and they undergo 6 to 18 months of work in accredited public hospitals, and they then write the online CMSA diploma examination. Then we have 38 specialist certifications, or so-called fellowships, and these doctors all undergo 4 to 5 years of university-based registrar training. They then write the college exams, and they have to complete an MEd research dissertation to be able to be registered as a specialist. And then we have 44 subspecialist certifications, and this is a 2-year university-based senior registrar positions, and they write the CMSA certificate examinations. And then we have 5 admission ceremonies around the country, in Tata, in Durban, in Bloemfontein, Cape Town, and in Johannesburg, which are really joyous occasions where we confer all these fellowships, diplomas, and certificates. The College of Medicine is more than just an examining body. If you go back to its founding document, it is to promote the highest degree of skill, efficiency, ethical standards, and professional conduct for the benefit of humanity, and to promote the honor of the medical and dental profession. So a much broader mandate. And this is why we're involved in advocacy matters around health. We've established a health policy committee to gauge government at all levels of government to help shape specialist medicine in the country. We're launching an education platform next week, which is funded by Life Healthcare, and we're also now getting involved in research, but more importantly, sharing of research. And the reason we're doing this is if you look at this map here of the world, where they've scaled the different regions of the world according to the scientific articles published in 2016, it's quite striking how far behind we are in Africa. We're simply not publishing enough research, and that has impact on our on the quality of our healthcare, as well as in Africa and elsewhere. And so we believe that research, but even more importantly, sharing research, is really key to improving healthcare outcomes, to advancing the careers of young specialists. We know that only 38% of the MEd research dissertations at the universities are ever published, which means they're not impactful in any way. We know there's an editorial bias against low and middle income country research by high income country journals. And we also know we need additional journal capacity in our country, especially for the disciplines, for the smaller disciplines. Now, the new way of publishing is open access journals. And this is a digital online publishing model. It offers a free access to readers, very importantly, and therefore equitable access for global North and global South academics and doctors to access knowledge and advances in healthcare. And it's interesting in this graph here how you notice that the blue line represents the number of publications internationally in open access journals, and the red line are the closed journals. These are the conventional paper journals where you have to pay to download an article. And you'll see how the open access journals have grown, and in 2022 they've actually bypassed the closed journals. So this is the future. But obviously there's a cost. I mean, your publishers have to cover their costs. And this is being recouped through article processing charges, or so-called APCs. And this is where they bill the author or the institution or their funders to publish articles. Around the world, it's anywhere between 20,000 and 120,000 Rand that the author has to pay simply to publish their research. I'm an ENT surgeon, and ENT journals, the mean internationally is about 50,000 Rand simply to publish an article. And the well-known journal Nature, they charge authors 220,000 Rand simply to publish their research, which is simply unaffordable for us in this country. We recently published this study: are open access article processing charges affordable for otolaryngologists in low-income and middle-income countries? And we had respondents from 21 countries, and you'll notice that the majority earn less than $1,500 per month. And 52% of the residents or the registrars in training are unpaid for the entire training, which means they simply can't afford to publish their research. And so we concluded from the study that article processing charges are unaffordable for low and middle income country authors, that generating, sharing science and innovation is being financially determined more and more rather than by quality. And there's a real risk of us excluding research from about 80% of the world's population, which will also make healthcare advances in the first world poorer. And here, in this graph here, the grey columns represent gold open access articles. That's where the authors don't pay to publish, and it's open access. The light blue are the hybrid. That's where the author still pays, as we mentioned earlier, to make it open access. And the dark blue are the conventional journals where you don't pay, but they're not open access. So you have to pay to actually access the articles. And it's striking how in the high income country, there's been a rapid growth over the years in the hybrid or pay to publish group because they can afford it. Whereas on the low and middle income countries on the right, which includes our country, there's been hardly any movement there because we simply can't afford these article processing charges. So this is one of the main reasons why the Colleges of Medicine recently established a Journal of the Colleges of Medicine of South Africa. It was launched in July last year. We were really fortunate to have a really powerful leadership. Our editor-in-chief is Professor Soraya Sidat. She's the head of psychiatry at the University of Stellenbosch, past recipient of the Chancellor's Award for Research at Stellenbosch, and I think she's the fifth most published medical researcher in the country. Our deputy editor is Andre Broussard. He's a retired professor of anesthesia living in South Africa. And our Journal Oversight Committee, we have Professor Johnny Mahlangu, who's the Vice President of the CMSA. He's a past President of the College of Pathologists and also the current Chair of the South African Medical Research Council. And we have Professor Matsateche, who's a past President of the CMSA. He's the Head of Nuclear Medicine at the University of Pretoria and a well-known academic internationally. And he's the past Chair of the South African Medical Research Council. So a really powerful leadership to get the journal on its way. And really what this journal is an open access, online, international scientific journal. It serves all medical, surgical, and dental specialties as well as the basic sciences. It's importantly a joint project with the universities. So the Committee of Deans is represented on our editorial board. The focus is mainly on research from South Africa and from Africa and low and middle income countries, but also high income countries. And importantly, we want to get the registrars' MEd research dissertations into press so they can be impactful. And also to challenge this mindset that you need to publish in high income journals for it to have academic worth. So our publisher, AOSIS, which is based in Cape Town, says it's the strongest launch of a new journal that they've ever witnessed. We've had total submissions in the past few months of 60, accepted 17, and in review 15. So we're really going along well. And we wanted to be an international journal, and even at this very early stage, we have interest in the journal's website from all around the world. But the reason that I'm speaking to you really is also about the article processing charges waiver fund. And we've established this waiver fund, it's an endowment fund, to ensure that the ability to pay should never be a barrier to sharing research. And for us, it's a strong issue of social justice. Our target is to raise 12 million rand, the interest of which will pay for about 100 articles per annum. So, we've already raised 2.7 million. We had a generous contribution from Adcock Ingram very early on. The colleges of the CMSA has contributed. The Carl and Emily Fuchs Foundation has contributed. A group of ENT surgeons, the Chinese University of Hong Kong, and a number of individual donors. And so what we're proposing here to you and your companies, your member companies, is that there are really three ways that you might wish to contribute, if this is something that interests you. The first way would be to make a single contribution to the APC waiver fund, as Adcock Ingram has done. The second way is to make an annual contribution, perhaps over 10 years, to the APC waiver fund, so we can build this endowment fund. And the third one, especially for the smaller companies, is they might want to make an annual payment for a selected number of articles, which cost about 12,500 Rand each. So we can ensure that those who can't afford to publish can actually publish their research. So in summary, really, we're very confident this is going to become a leading peer-reviewed international journal. It's going to increase South African and developing world research output and visibility. We want to get the SAMED, so dissertations that the universities produce, into press so they can be impactful and also build people's careers. We want to challenge the mindset that you need to publish in high-income journals for to have academic worth. And importantly, to mitigate the high article processing charges that are spoken about, to ensure the ability to pay should never be a barrier to sharing research. And I'm hoping that this will be part of a bigger partnership between SAMED and industry and the Colleges of Medicine of South Africa. I believe it's so important, as I'm sure you'll agree, that we have to build private-public social, have a public and private social compact in South Africa to support institutions and not always individuals. And the CMSA, I believe, is the key for specialized medicine and dentistry in our country. It is the apex organization for medical and dental specialists. We have more than 11,000 members from all disciplines. Every specialist in this country has qualified through the CMSA, so we're a key organization. We are the custodian of specialist standards in the country. We have a high status and credibility both in the public and private sectors, as well as universities and the Department of Health, and we bring with us also international status and credibility. So that's really what I wanted to share with you. Thank you very much for the opportunity, and I'm very happy to take some discussion or some questions.
Thank you so much, Prof. And just to let you know that this request does align with the Medical Device Code of Marketing, of Ethical Marketing and Business Practice, so the members don't need to be concerned around that. Any questions?
Hi, Tanya. It's Neil. I posted my question. I thought I was going to drop off, but we managed to delay that meeting. So thank you for the update, Prof Fagan. So my question was just around how successful you've been gaining some support from the funders and groups and hospital day clinics, etc., and possibly also some of the specialist organizations like SAOA and maybe the Heart Foundation and BUSA.
Yes, thank you very much, Neil. Fundraising is hard, as you know, and I'm learning that along the way. I was very impressed with Adcock Ingram sort of giving us about R1 million seed funding right up front. So they took a leap of faith. We have had negotiation with Aspen. We're waiting for them to come back to us. PPS is going to come back to us as well. But I've been surprised at how our colleagues don't invest much in our own country, and most of the funding actually come from abroad. And I think that perhaps affects a certain mindset. Maybe people are negative about the future, but I really feel that we have to throw our lot behind our own country and causes, and so that's why I'm really coming to you. Yeah,
just speaking on in general across the sector, most of the companies do have medical education programs and support. Obviously, there's been a change in how the companies can do that from a compliance perspective over the last few years, but there certainly is a lot of support and funds put back into their various sectors directly through to registrars and registrar programs, and then obviously in specialists that are in private healthcare. So hence the reason why they are maybe stretched a bit with some of the funding to support at another sort of not quite a grassroots level, but at another level. But I'm certainly aware of the sectors certainly contributing funds towards general medical education across the sector. I'm happy to open to any other questions if there are. But Caroline, I can't see if their hands raised.
If I can also respond to that. But certainly, as you say, lots of companies like Medtronic has made major sort of investments in training. But I think we need to also focus on institutions, as I said. It's often very rather than to fund individuals who might or might not immigrate. And so that's my plea, is that we should really look after the institutions. We've seen that with ESCOM and others, where we don't support institutions, what the impact can be.
Good, thank you very much, Prof. I don't see any hands, and we've had one or two unfortunately needed to drop off because we've got a meeting with Gauteng Health around some payments. So I'll just open it up. If there's anyone who has a question, just go. Don't need to raise your hand, just speak.
So Neil, while you're looking for hands and comments, I just want to urge the SAMED members to support Prof Fagan on this. I think it's a no-brainer in terms of what is needed, building capacity, and getting us forward. I think there's direct benefit for us in medium to long term as a sector. So this is a good cause to support. Back to you, Neil.
Thank you, Peter. I'll just wait to see if there's any other questions or comments.
Neil, what I have done is I have shared this presentation with Caroline Scott, so she can most certainly share that with your members, and then and then I'll communicate with your membership perhaps through Tanya and her office. That would be okay.
Perfect. We'll certainly circulate that, Prof.
Okay. Thank you ever so much for having me. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you very much for your time, and I think we're going to wrap up. So I'd like to extend a thank you to everyone that's attended, and obviously a special mention to our speakers and an update from the SAMED office. I would certainly encourage everyone to engage with the speakers and their various initiatives, and also to stay involved with all the SAMED initiatives that we have set in the near future. Thank you very much. I think it's a very productive session, and have a great weekend, everyone.
Yeah, thanks all. Cheers.